Tanya's scream shattered the pristine silence of Westlake Hospital's 8th floor like glass hitting concrete. "The IV bag is poisoned!" Her voice, raw with desperation, echoed through the VIP corridor where the city's elite came to heal in luxury. "Someone tampered with the medication!" Every head turned toward the woman in the gray cleaning uniform, her trembling finger pointed at the transparent tube feeding directly into the veins of 19-year-old Abigail Mitchell. The girl was more than just another patient. She was the daughter of Dr. Warren Mitchell, the hospital's feared CEO and one of the country's most celebrated cardiac surgeons. Dr. Reed, his white coat pristine and his authority absolute, stepped forward with the confidence of a man who had never been questioned by someone of Tanya's station. "Control yourself," he commanded, his voice cutting through her panic. "What do you think you're doing?" Behind him, Dr. Olivia exchanged a look with the attending nurse, a mixture of embarrassment and irritation at this unprecedented breach of hospital hierarchy. Dr. Mitchell himself, who had been studying his daughter's chart with the intensity of a man fighting time itself, looked up with disbelief that quickly morphed into fury. But Tanya had cleaned these halls for 15 years. She had scrubbed blood from operating room floors, emptied countless waste bins, and learned to read the hospital's rhythm like a musician reading sheet music. Most importantly, she had developed a nose for danger that came from years of silent observation. "I know the smell of bitter almonds," she said, her voice steadying with conviction. "This solution is contaminated with cyanide." Her finger traced the small crystals forming at the bottom of the IV bag like deadly snow. "Disconnect it now, or the girl will die in minutes." For one heart-stopping second, Dr. Reed hesitated. Something in Tanya's voice, the certainty of someone who had seen too much to be wrong, made him gesture to the nurse. The IV flow stopped with a soft click that seemed to echo through the room. "This is absurd," Reed muttered, but his voice betrayed the first crack in his certainty. Dr. Mitchell was already at his daughter's bedside, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of a surgeon and the desperate urgency of a father. "Accelerated pulse, dilated pupils," he noted aloud, his face draining of color. "She was improving until now." His eyes swept the room like searchlights. "Who prepared this medication?" The question landed like an accusation. The nurse stammered about following protocol, her words tumbling over each other in defense of routines that had suddenly become suspect. "Call security and isolate this bag," Mitchell ordered, his voice now carrying the steel of a man who had just realized his daughter's life hung by a thread thinner than he had ever imagined. "And bring the cyanide poisoning kit from emergency, now." As the medical team exploded into action, Tanya retreated to a corner, watching the chaos her intervention had unleashed. Then Abigail began to convulse, her body confirming what Tanya's instincts had screamed. For one brief moment her eyes met Dr. Mitchell's, no longer the intimidating CEO but simply a father confronting the possibility of losing everything that mattered. 3 weeks earlier, Tanya had arrived at work in the pre-dawn darkness that had become her sanctuary. At 4 a.m, Westlake Hospital transformed into something entirely different from its daytime persona. The corridors stretched empty and quiet, lit only by the essential lights that painted everything in soft shadows. The silence was broken only by the distant beep of monitors and the whispered conversations of night shift nurses, a piece that Tanya treasured before the daily invasion of doctors with their important clipboards and air of untouchable authority. This Monday had begun like countless others. She retrieved her cleaning cart from the basement storage, methodically checked her supplies, and tucked extra masks and gloves into her uniform pockets. The service elevator carried her upward with its familiar mechanical hum, and she pressed the button for the 8th floor, her first stop in a routine as precisely choreographed as a dance she had been performing for 15 years. The 8th floor housed the VIP patients, the wealthy and powerful who expected their suffering to be cushioned by luxury. Hospital policy demanded these rooms be cleaned before 6 a.m, ensuring that the illustrious patients and their equally illustrious visitors would never be disturbed by the sight of someone actually working for their comfort. But when the elevator doors opened that morning, something felt wrong. The air itself seemed different, charged with tension that made the hair on Tanya's arms stand up. Normally, only the head nurse from the night shift would be at the station, quietly organizing the handover to the incoming day team. Instead, heated voices drifted down the corridor from room 805, voices filled with an urgency that made Tanya's instincts flare. She pushed her cart silently down the hall, intending to start at the opposite end and avoid whatever drama was unfolding. But then she heard words that made her blood freeze in her veins. "You understand what's at stake here, don't you?" The male voice was tense, almost threatening. "The board will vote next week. If she survives and talks, everything will be lost." "Don't pressure me, Reed." The female voice was equally tense but more controlled, like a snake coiled to strike. "I'm aware of the risks, but we can't just end her. There are cameras, records, nurses. Mitchell himself has practically set up camp in her room." "Olivia, you know very well there are ways that leave no trace, an adjustment to the medication, an unexpected reaction. It happens every day in hospitals around the world." Tanya's heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the voices. Dr. Reed, head of neurology, a man whose reputation for brilliance was matched only by his arrogance. Dr. Olivia, clinical director, known for her icy efficiency and political maneuvering. And they were casually discussing murder as if it were a minor scheduling conflict. Her mind raced, desperate to find an innocent explanation. Maybe they were discussing some terminal case, some agonizing decision about withdrawing life support. Medical ethics could be complex, couldn't it? But their next words shattered any hope of innocent interpretation. "The accident was convenient, I have to admit," Reed continued with chilling casualness. "No one questions a young woman driving at high speed on a rainy night, but she's recovering too quickly, and with each passing day, she may remember more. If Abigail tells her father what she saw at the New Year's Eve party—" "I know," Olivia cut in sharply. "The entire scheme falls apart. But we need to be smart about this. I can't just walk into the room and inject something lethal into the CEO's daughter." "It doesn't have to be you. I have contacts." Reed's voice dropped to a whisper that forced Tanya to edge closer, her heart beating so loudly she was certain it would give her away. "I've already arranged for something that will look like a natural complication. A pulmonary embolism, perhaps, or a severe allergic reaction to medication. Something that not even a detailed autopsy would identify as murder." The silence that followed was more terrifying than their words. Then came the sound of footsteps approaching the door. Panic sent Tanya diving into the nearest service bathroom, the door closing behind her with what seemed like the sound of a gunshot. She pressed her back against the wall, trying to control her breathing, while her heart threatened to beat its way out of her chest. Abigail Mitchell. Everyone at the hospital knew about her accident 3 weeks ago. Dr. Mitchell, normally a distant and intimidating figure who barely acknowledged the existence of support staff, had been seen wandering the corridors with red eyes and rumpled clothes, the picture of a father living his worst nightmare. The girl was recovering, which should have been cause for celebration throughout the hospital. Instead, it was a death sentence. What could a 19-year-old have possibly seen at a New Year's Eve party that was worth killing for? What kind of conspiracy would justify murdering the CEO's daughter? Tanya waited 10 agonizing minutes before emerging from her hiding place. The corridor was empty again, but the conversation had burned itself into her memory like acid. She looked at her watch, 4:30 a.m. She still had time to complete her rounds before the hospital came alive with its daily chaos. But the words she had overheard followed her like ghosts as she mechanically cleaned each empty room. When she reached room 805, she hesitated outside Abigail's door. Every instinct screamed at her to skip this room, to avoid getting any deeper into whatever nightmare she had stumbled into. But that would draw attention, and attention was the last thing she could afford. She had to act normally, even as her world had been turned upside down. She knocked softly and entered. The room was dimly lit, bathed in the soft glow of monitors and a small lamp that painted everything in gentle amber. In the bed, Abigail slept with the vulnerability of someone whose body was fighting its way back from the edge of death. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped softly, electronic lullabies monitoring every heartbeat and breath. In the armchair beside the bed, Dr. Mitchell had fallen asleep in what looked like an extremely uncomfortable position, still wearing yesterday's lab coat. The sight of him, this powerful man reduced to an exhausted father keeping vigil, made Tanya's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She began cleaning silently, her movements automatic after years of practice. As she worked, she studied Abigail's face. The girl had been a familiar presence at the hospital throughout her life, first as the little girl who ran through corridors while her father made rounds, then as the teenage volunteer who read stories to hospitalized children. Tanya had watched her grow up from a distance, though they had never really spoken. The knowledge that someone wanted to kill this young woman made her hands shake as she dusted the bedside table. Should she tell Dr. Mitchell what she had overheard? But who would believe the word of a cleaning woman against two of the most respected doctors in the hospital? It would be her word against theirs, and the outcome of that battle was painfully predictable. At best, she would lose her job. At worst, she might become their next target. No, she needed to be smarter than that. She needed evidence, or at least she needed to make sure nothing happened to Abigail while she figured out her next move. Over the following days, Tanya subtly altered her routine. She arrived even earlier, sometimes at 3:30 a.m., and found reasons to stay later. The 8th floor became her obsession. She memorized the face of everyone who entered Abigail's room, learned the medication schedules by heart, and could recite the names of every nurse on duty. She became invisible in a way that went beyond her usual anonymity. She became part of the hospital's infrastructure, as unnoticed as the walls themselves. 5 days after overhearing the conversation, she was pretending to clean the corridor when Dr. Reed emerged from room 805. The satisfied expression on his face made her blood turn to ice water. He checked. His watch, with the precision of a man whose plans were proceeding perfectly, made a note in Abigail's chart and walked away whistling softly, the sound more chilling than any scream. As soon as the elevator doors closed behind him, Tanya approached the nursing station where Brenda, a veteran nurse with 20 years of experience and a reputation for kindness, was making notes. "Brenda," she called softly, trying to keep her voice casual. "I noticed Dr. Reed just left Dr. Mitchell's daughter's room. Is she improving?" Brenda looked up, surprised by the interest. "Actually, yes. She woke up last night for the first time since the accident. She's conscious and even talked a bit with her father. It's honestly miraculous considering the severity of her head trauma." "That's wonderful news," Tanya smiled, though her stomach churned with dread. "Does she remember the accident?" The nurse's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicious of the unusual line of questioning. "Why the interest, Tanya?" "Oh, nothing special," she deflected quickly. "It's just that everyone likes the girl, you know? She was always polite to us cleaning staff, unlike some of the doctors around here who don't even acknowledge our existence." This explanation seemed to satisfy Brenda, who relaxed visibly. She's still confused about many things. Post-traumatic amnesia is normal in these cases, but Dr. Mitchell is optimistic. She asked some questions about the New Year's Eve party and mentioned someone named Blake. Brenda shrugged as if it were unimportant. Anyway, if she continues improving at this rate, she could be transferred home in just a few days. Tanya's heart began racing. This was it, the moment Reed had been waiting for. Abigail was starting to remember, and he knew it. Whatever he had planned would happen soon, very soon. The next morning, Tanya arrived at the hospital at 3:00 a.m., determined not to leave the 8th floor unguarded. She collected her cart, but abandoned her normal routine, instead finding a small supply closet near room 805. She hid inside, leaving the door slightly ajar to observe the corridor. For 2 hours, nothing happened beyond the usual hospital routine: nurses making their rounds, a resident doctor hurrying past with an armload of charts, Dr. Mitchell briefly leaving his daughter's room for what was probably a desperate coffee break. At 5:15 a.m., just as Tanya was beginning to think her vigil was pointless, a figure appeared at the far end of the corridor. It wasn't Reed or Olivia, but a man she had never seen before, dressed as a lab technician and carrying a small medical case. He moved with the stealth of someone who belonged in shadows, checking both directions before slipping into Abigail's room. Tanya's heart hammered as she crept from her hiding place. Through the small glass window in the door, she watched the man work with the precision of a professional. Dr. Mitchell had fallen asleep again in his chair, exhaustion finally claiming him after days of constant vigilance. The stranger opened his case, removed a syringe and small vial, and drew liquid from the vial with movements that spoke of extensive practice. Then, with the casual efficiency of someone following a routine, he injected the liquid into the IV bag that fed directly into Abigail's bloodstream. Time seemed to slow as Tanya watched him pack his instruments, check for any traces of his presence, and head for the door. She barely managed to dive behind her cleaning cart before he emerged, walking past her without a glance as he disappeared into the service elevator. The moment the doors closed, Tanya burst into the room. There was no time for explanations or gentle wake-up calls. The poison, and she was absolutely certain it was poison, was already in the IV line, seconds away from entering Abigail's bloodstream. With movements driven by pure desperation, she closed the valve controlling the IV flow. Dr. Mitchell jerked awake at the noise. "What? Who are you? What are you doing?" He stood up, still disoriented from sleep, and suddenly facing a cleaning woman tampering with his daughter's life support. "Dr. Mitchell, someone just poisoned your daughter's IV," Tanya said rapidly, her words tumbling over each other in urgency. "A man I've never seen before, dressed as a lab technician. He injected something into the IV bag." The doctor stared at her as if she had declared the sky was falling. "What are you talking about? How dare you? Please, sir," Tanya interrupted, desperation giving her courage to cut off one of the most powerful men in the city. "Just look at the bag. The liquid has changed color. It's cloudier now, and there's a smell like bitter almonds." Something in her voice, the absolute certainty of someone who had witnessed the unthinkable, made Dr. Mitchell pause. He approached the IV bag and examined it carefully. What he saw made his face go pale. "You're right," he said quietly. "Something is definitely wrong here." With practiced efficiency, he quickly replaced the IV line with a new one, carefully sealing the suspicious bag. "How did you know about this? Who are you exactly?" "Tanya, from the cleaning staff," she replied, relief flooding through her at being taken seriously. "I overheard a conversation a few days ago. Dr. Reed and Dr. Olivia were discussing making sure your daughter wouldn't survive because she witnessed something at a New Year's Eve party, something that could destroy them." Dr. Mitchell's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, understanding, and finally, cold fury. "The party at Reed's beach house," he said slowly. "Abigail called me that night. She seemed frightened, said she needed to talk to me urgently about something horrible she had seen. But before we could meet, she had the accident." His eyes narrowed dangerously. "A very convenient accident, now that I think about it." He pulled out his cell phone and dialed with sharp, precise movements. "Security, this is Dr. Mitchell. Lock down the building immediate." "Eli, no one enters or leaves without my authorization, especially anyone from the medical directorate, and send a team to room 805 right now." In the days that followed, Westlake Hospital was consumed by revelations that sent shockwaves through the medical community. Analysis of the IV bag confirmed the presence of cyanide in quantities sufficient to kill Abigail within minutes. The man Tanya had witnessed was quickly identified and captured while attempting to flee the city, a former nurse with a history of selling controlled medications on the black market, hired by Reed for this particular job. Under the weight of mounting evidence and facing the possibility of murder charges, Reed's composure finally cracked. The scheme he and Olivia had been so desperate to protect was revealed as a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had been operating for years. They had been systematically diverting expensive medications and organs designated for transplant, falsifying compatibility results to redirect organs to private patients who paid enormous sums under the table, while legitimate patients died on waiting lists. The oncological and immunosuppressive medications meant for regular patients had been replaced with diluted versions, or placebos, then sold on the black market for massive profits. The scope of their betrayal was breathtaking. They had built their wealth on the suffering and death of the very people they had sworn to heal. At the New Year's Eve party at Reed's Beach House, Abigail had accidentally entered an office where the conspirators were openly discussing their operations, believing all the guests had left. Horrified by what she had heard, the young woman had tried to escape discreetly, but Reed had spotted her. Hours later, her car had mysteriously gone off the road, leaving her in a coma that was supposed to be permanent. 2 weeks after the poisoned IV incident, Tanya found herself in the surreal position of being summoned to Dr. Mitchell's office. She entered nervously, still struggling to adjust to being treated as a hero instead of furniture. The CEO greeted her with a tired but genuine smile, and beside him sat Abigail in a wheelchair, still pale and fragile, but unmistakably alive. "Tanya," Dr. Mitchell began, "I wanted us to meet formally. My daughter insisted on it." Abigail extended her hand with a smile that transformed her entire face. "Thank you for saving my life," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Dad told me everything you did, how you risked your job, your safety, to protect me." "It was nothing, dear," Tanya replied, embarrassed by the attention and praise. "I just did what any decent person would do." "No," Dr. Mitchell interrupted firmly. "You did what very few people would have the courage to do. You stood up to an entire system designed to silence voices like yours." He opened his desk drawer and removed an envelope. "The hospital board unanimously agreed to recognize your integrity and courage. There's a substantial reward here that we hope will make your life more comfortable." Tanya accepted the envelope with trembling hands, not opening it. "Thank you, doctor, but I didn't do this for money." "I know," he nodded approvingly. "That's exactly why we're also offering something more meaningful." He paused, exchanging a glance with his daughter. "Abigail told me you've always wanted to study nursing but never had the opportunity." Tanya's eyes widened in shock. How could Abigail possibly know that? As if reading her thoughts, the young woman smiled. "You talked to me while you were cleaning my room during the first days after my accident," Abigail explained gently. "You thought I couldn't hear because I was in a coma, but I heard everything. You talked about your dreams, about how you had cared for your sick mother, about how you wanted to become a nurse to help people like her." "The hospital will fully fund your nursing education," Dr. Mitchell continued. "Complete tuition, books, living expenses, everything, and your job will be guaranteed here when you graduate, if you choose to accept." For a moment, Tanya couldn't speak. For 15 years, she had been essentially invisible in this hospital, just another piece of equipment that kept the place running, part of the scenery that important people looked through rather than at. Now, ironically, it was this very invisibility that had allowed her to uncover the conspiracy and save Abigail's life. "I accept," she finally managed, tears streaming down her face. "But I have one condition." Dr. Mitchell raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised. "And what would that be?" "I want to help completely redesign the hospital's safety protocols," Tanya said with growing confidence. "I want to ensure that every voice is heard and valued, from doctors to cleaning staff. That's how I was able to save your daughter, because I know this hospital from perspectives that doctors never see. There's wisdom in every corner of this place, and we're wasting it by ignoring the people who see everything but are never asked to speak." The CEO considered this for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Not only fair, but absolutely necessary," he agreed. He stood and extended his hand formally. "Welcome to your new position as Westlake Hospital's Director of Patient Safety, Tanya." As she shook hands with her former boss, Tanya marveled at how completely life could change in a moment. For years, she had walked these corridors invisibly, absorbing their secrets, learning their rhythms, understanding their hidden dangers. She had never imagined that this accumulated knowledge would one day save Alo, if and transform her own future entirely. As she left the office with Abigail insisting on accompanying her to the elevator, Tanya looked at the hospital with completely new eyes. The same corridors she had cleaned for 15 years were now the pathway to a future she had never dared dream of, and all because, at one crucial moment, she had refused to remain invisible. The following week, as Reed and Olivia awaited trial and the hospital underwent comprehensive restructuring, Tanya walked through the lobby dressed in civilian clothes and carrying a backpack full of textbooks. It was her first day of the preparatory course for the nursing college entrance exam. In the lobby, she passed a group of cleaning staff. They greeted her with smiles and respectful nods, no longer as a colleague, but as the woman who had exposed one of the biggest scandals in the hospital's history. She returned their greetings warmly and continued toward her classroom, acutely aware that her days of invisibility were forever behind her. As she walked, she remembered her mother's words from so many years ago. "My daughter, it's not the position that defines a person's worth, but their integrity when faced with impossible choices." Her mother had been right, as always, and now, thanks to one act of courage at a crucial moment, Tanya finally had the chance to transform her forced invisibility into a presence that would save countless lives in the future. Westlake Hospital would never be the same. Neither would she. 6 months later, with Reed and Olivia's trial still making headlines, Tanya had completed her first semester of nursing school with perfect grades. Her professors regularly commented on her extraordinary clinical intuition, something developed through years of silently observing medical routines while scrubbing floors and emptying waste bins. The knowledge she had accumulated as an invisible observer was now becoming a powerful tool to save lives, this time with credentials that officially recognized her value. Abigail had made a complete recovery and decided to completely change her life path. She abandoned her business administration studies to pursue medicine, inspired not only by her father's example, but primarily by Tanya's courage. "Tanya taught me that true medicine isn't found in the diplomas hanging on walls," she told a local newspaper covering the story, "but in the genuine desire to protect lives, even when it means risking everything you have." The investigation triggered by Tanya's case revealed that the corruption was far more extensive than anyone had imagined. The organ trafficking and medication diversion scheme involved a network of 5 hospitals across 3 states. 17 healthcare professionals were arrested, and millions of dollars in diverted medications were recovered. Most importantly, hundreds of patients on transplant waiting lists finally received compatible organs that had previously been redirected to the highest bidders. Dr. Mitchell, transformed by the experience of almost losing his daughter and discovering such extensive corruption within his own institution, implemented what became known as the Tanya Protocol throughout his entire hospital network. This revolutionary system created safe channels for employees at all levels to report irregularities without fear of retaliation, while incorporating the wisdom and experience of support staff in patient safety decisions. Hospitals that adopted the protocol reported significant decreases in medical errors and dramatic increases in satisfaction from both patients and staff. On a sunny spring afternoon, as Tanya studied in the hospital's new library, a space that had been created as part of the reforms, she received a call that left her speechless. The American Nursing Association had created an annual award in her honor, the Tanya Harris Courage Award, recognizing healthcare professionals who demonstrated exceptional ethical courage in patient care. She would be the first recipient at the inaugural ceremony, with all expenses paid for her family to attend. As she hung up the phone, she looked out the window at the hospital garden where recovering patients walked slowly among the flowers. From invisible to icon, her journey was living proof that heroism requires no uniform or title, just a heart willing to do what's right when no one else is watching. The girl who had once been so invisible that doctors looked through her had become impossible to ignore. But more than that, she had proven that the most unlikely heroes are often those who have always been there, unnoticed but fundamental, waiting for their moment to step into the light and change everything.